Hi everyone, thank you for bearing with me while I try to navigate my poor tech skills. So I'm Giulia Malerbi, I'm the head of global policy at Aquatic Life Institute, and today I will be sharing with you a topic that it's particularly dear to my heart. I became really passionate about, so buckle up because this presentation could last 4 hours. No, I'm joking. I'll try to make it quick because I'm actually interested in hearing your thoughts and comments on this topic. Very briefly, at Aquatic Life Institute, we are a global NGO and we dedicated at safeguarding the welfare of aquatic animals. Our goal is to promote positive change within the seafood industry and beyond at the global level. So just a little bit briefly about me. I come from a scientific background, so I have a degree in animal breeding techniques, which is funny, so I was trained to become a farmer, which is really funny, and then a master's in animal welfare and science and ethics, and now I'm pursuing a master's in animal law studies. So why I'm sharing with you stuff about me, because that's what I put into this presentation. So there's gonna be scientific and legislative aspects. I'm gonna walk you through the issue of octopus farming by exploring the welfare, ethical implications of this practice, moving into the environmental and health risks associated with it, and then we're gonna move a little bit more into the legislative aspect, and hopefully I will convince you to agree with me that we really strongly need preemptive and proactive measures to ban harmful practices like this one. And I'm gonna end hopefully in a bit of a more positive note by sharing with you some global efforts that have been carried out in several jurisdictions. Okay, let's see if I can do this. Okay, now before diving into my talk, I would like to share with you something a little bit more personal. I started working at Aquatic Life Institute 2 years ago, and I admit to you that I knew nothing about this topic, so the team was discussing all this issue, and I thought, okay, let's really dive into this. Let's do some research. Why is this team so against this? And during my research, I came across this photo. Now, what captured my attention wasn't the photo per se, but is the caption that, I hope you can read it. It says, "Octopus raised in captivity like this one could save their wild relatives from overfishing." Now, I admit to you that personally, I really struggle to see farming as a conservation effort. But I also think that as animal law advocates, it's our duty to challenge what could easily be our own perspective. So I really decided to dive deeper into this topic, read a lot of research on this. And unfortunately, I'm standing here in front of you after 1 year and a half being advocating for a global ban on this practice, because I became convinced that octopus farming really represents a symbol of what humans shouldn't be doing, which is actually the title of an article that came out on The Guardian earlier this year, and I think it perfectly encapsulates everything that is wrong with this practice. But let's dive right in. So why are we talking about this? Most of you will know that the global demand for seafood in the past few years, unfortunately I would say, is continuously rising. And this is adding significant pressure on marine ecosystem and aquatic populations. Now, this demand obviously led to overfishing, depleting many species at unsustainable rates. And among those affected, we find octopuses. Now, in response to this reduction of wild octopus population linked to overfishing, the seafood industry didn't necessarily see a problem, but an opportunity to fill in the supply gap by turning to aquaculture, as we've seen, unfortunately, in many species. And just to give you an idea why we are tackling this as a global issue, we've heard of plans of farms being considered in Spain, Mexico, the US, of Japan. So this already gives you an idea of, this is not just one single jurisdiction try and do this, but there's many jurisdictions who are following this terrible idea. Now, why is octopus farming seen as an opportunity? Now, I put here the reasons why I believe octopuses are being considered attractive, let's say, for aquaculture operation. For those of you who don't know, octopuses actually grow very quickly. They reach maturity within a matter of months. their lifespan is about 1 to 2 years. So if you think of a farming cycle, this would allow a very fast turnover. And we know from other industry that industry loves fast-growing animals and fast-growing breeds. And then last but not least, octopus meat is sold at a very premium price. So it has a very high value on the market. So I'm convinced that these economic reasons are the real reasons why these animals are being considered for intensive aquaculture operations. I also believe, though, that in 2024, we cannot just look at economic considerations. And so I hope that by the end of my talk, I will have convinced you that this notion that farming octopus would alleviate pressure on their wild counterparts is not only misleading, but it's actually oversimplified, because it doesn't take into account the broader implication on the ecosystem as well as on animal welfare, of course. Speaking of which, I'm a little bit of a fangirl of octopus here, so I hope you'll share with me this passion for this incredibly intelligent and complex beings, and who are renowned for their I'm not doing anything wrong, right? For their problem solving abilities and cognitive abilities. Now, why I'm telling you this? Because this means that in an intensive farming setting, actually achieving the environmental enrichment and mental stimulation that these animals would need, it's almost impossible. So to octopus, this would mean severe boredom and chronic stress. Secondly, these animals are solitary by nature. Unfortunately, a standard industry practice is high stocking densities. We've seen already in some research facilities who have been trying to intensively farm octopuses for something like over 10 years, and I dare to say failing a little bit, that this, when it comes to octopus, it means cannibalism, because these animals are just not suited to stay in barren tanks with high stocking densities. And also, let me share with you that these animals lack both an internal and external skeletons. So this means they're actually extremely fragile to any change in the environment. And if you think of a typical farming setting, this would really highly complicate management in farming setups. And then last but not least, there is to date no humane slaughter method known to slaughter octopuses. For example, for the wild octopus, what has been used to date is the technique of ice slurry, which, unfortunately for those of you who are familiar with it, is actually a technique, a very cruel technique, and even the European Food Safety Authority discourages the uses of this because of the pain and suffering that it causes. Now, let's see if this works. Oh, maybe it works. There's no QR code. Okay, well, anyways, sorry, my tech skills failed. I'm trying to beat this, but so this was a question for all of you, and just to think about, what do species like salmon, shrimp, and tuna eat? Imagine that here there are multiple choices and you can select, okay? Just picture this. So it could be algae, plankton, other fish, anything you can think of, right? And choose one in your mind. Let's not rely on technology too much, okay? Just have a think. Now, the correct answer, I'm not a professor, so I wasn't going to quiz you, just trying to make this more interactive and not be a total boomer with tech. The right question would be other fish. Now, why? Why did I ask you this? Because these species, salmon, shrimp, and tuna, are carnivorous species. Now, I didn't know this before I started advocating for these animals. Well, I didn't reflect on this. Let me put it this way. Why did I try to quiz you on this? Because octopus is also a carnivore species. Why does this matter? Because this means that in order to thrive, we need to feed these animals wild-caught feed. So this means that we are, again, trying to farm an animal that needs to rely on an unsustainable carnivorous diet, which would only further deplete fish stocks that, as I mentioned at the beginning, are already suffering. And again, I'm not just saying this. This we've already seen this. If you think of salmon farming, which unfortunately is a widely established industry of farming carnivorous species, we've already seen the detrimental impact that getting and producing fish meal, fish oil, or feed for salmons cause. So octopus farming would just be replicating these same issues. I also want to try and tackle this point of food security, because unfortunately when I talk to policymakers or industry folks who are in support of octopus farming, they tell me, but Giulia, but this is going to tackle food security. Well, let me just say this, octopus meat is not a necessity for survival. So, in other words, it's not going to feed the hungry world. And I'm not just saying this, but if you look at the consumption pattern of octopus meat, primarily the EU and the US. So, countries that have high disposable income and could easily shift to other products. So, let's face it, this argument is just flawed, because based on what I shared with you right now, these farming operations would actually use feed that could be used otherwise to directly nourish humans, and thereby actually trying to tackle food security. I also want to briefly touch upon diseases. Let me start with a disclaimer. We still don't know. There's still so much we don't know about these fascinating aliens of the ocean. But for sure, if I say octopus, I bet that one of the first things that pops into your mind is the fact that they are masters at escaping. They've done some crazy jobs in trying to escape enclosures. So think of a farming setting where an animal who has been given, I don't know, antibiotics or a specific feed escapes and goes into the wild. Now, this is not just a remote possibility when it comes to octopuses. It's actually a pretty likable event that could happen, and therefore spreading diseases from farm settings to the wild populations. And last but not least, our understanding of their immune system, again, it's very, very limited. And I don't know about you, but we just came out of a pandemic, and I feel that there's just so many unknowns and gaps in knowledge regarding these animals that it just feels a little bit naive claiming that, yes, we know how to handle them in captivity, on top of it being ethically wrong, in my opinion. Okay, I'm just quickly gonna move on the more legislative aspect. So that was supposed to be a video. Okay, I'll improve my tech skills for following conference, I promise. Those of you who are familiar with the existing legal framework for aquaculture, doesn't matter the jurisdiction, I hope you will agree with me that those existing legal frameworks are just ill-equipped to address the behavioral needs of these complex beings. So this means that with no specific provision for guaranteeing the welfare and needs of cephalopods, this potential emerging industry would remain completely unregulated. And again, in 2024, I don't think that's what we should try and do. I also want to try and debunk another claim that the one that I shared with you at the beginning. So the fact that farming them would alleviate pressure on wild populations. So this octopus farming being presented as a conservation effort. We already actually have evidence from other industries. Let me turn once again on salmon farming, just because it's such a detrimental practice that it's easy to make parallels with that. But the intensively farming salmon has absolutely not alleviated the pressure on wild salmon, but actually fishing efforts had to be increased in order to maintain profitability. So once again, this argument is flawed. And this actually leads me to the other point that I wanted to make. Again, these are common pushback, and I hear this when I talk to folks in support of octopus farming, so I'm not just coming up with those. They say, oh, but this is gonna create jobs and support the local communities. Again, this is flawed again, because by intensively farming octopuses, you are creating more competition. And we've seen this already if we take a look at Chile and Argentina, where large-scale salmon farming had so many detrimental impacts on the local people that actually led to a ban on intensive salmon farming in Tierra del Fuego in Argentina. So I hope that by now, actually, there's one more point that I wanted to make, which is just take a look at some of the recent global initiatives. For example, the UN High Seas Treaty or the EU Strategic Guidelines for Sustainable Aquaculture. They respectively aim to protect marine biodiversity and reduce our dependence on fish meal, fish oil. Now, based on everything that I just shared with you right now, octopus farming goes against those global conservation efforts, and I think we should do we should aim at practices that actually support these global conservation efforts. So I hope that by now I will have sort of convinced you that we need to prioritize, we need to advocate for proactive measures, actually, that prioritize animal welfare and environmental considerations from the very start, rather than address after irreversible damage has already occurred, like it's happening with salmon farming. Now, I promised with you that I wanted to share some actual global efforts, and I just took these 3 jurisdictions because I've been working on those a little bit more. Now, the European Union has long been considered a leader when it comes to animal welfare. I personally don't fully agree with this, but today I want to highlight a notable initiative, actually, which has been under scrutiny in this past few weeks, which is the ban on sealed product imports. Now, without delving in how this ban came to be, I just want to highlight that this ban was granted on the basis of protecting public morals. And to me, this looks like a perfect precedent that could be extended to octopus, and actually a EU ban on octopus farming would align with this EU principle of protecting and promoting an ethical treatment of animals. Those of you who are from the UK are just familiar with the Animal Welfare or the Sentience Act, that the Sentience Act acknowledges cephalopods' sentience. Now, we mentioned sentience earlier this morning, because to me, acknowledgement of sentience cannot just be a mere acknowledgement. To me, this actually places a legal duty on policymaker to take into consideration, for example, humane slaughter is not possible for these animals, hence this practice in the UK should be banned. That's it, based on animal welfare considerations. Otherwise, what's the acknowledgement for? And I promise you I was gonna end on a positive note. So, the US. We've had some quite positive successes in the US. First, at some state-level efforts. So some states have introduced bills to ban octopus farming, and actually Washington State in March signed the bill into legislation. So now octopus farming is prohibited in Washington State. California is next in line. We have the hearing in 3 days, so hopefully I will pass through. And then in the 2025 legislative session, there are already legislators who are willing to sponsor a similar bill in Connecticut, Hawaii, and Oregon. And actually, I've got a lot of positive news today. Just a few weeks ago, a bill by Senator Whitehouse was introduced in Congress that would not only prohibit octopus farming at the federal level, so all the US, but also prohibit the imports of farmed octopus products should they ever become available. So this, I just wanted to leave you with some positive, I guess, news that advocacy efforts do lead to positive outcomes. So these are just main takeaways from my talk. Very quickly, I don't think we should make the same mistakes with traditional land animal farming, but when I look at octopus farming, this feels the exact path that we are on. I believe that the focus should shift away from creating an aquaculture that is just cheap and efficient towards like truly sustainable alternatives, like the promotion of plant-based diet for human consumption, where we have access to diverse sources of food, but also for animals, so for sure not farming more carnivorous species. Obviously, governments have a critical role to play, and on top of working on preemptive bans, I believe that they should work on recovering programs by implementing fishing bans or establishing true marine protected areas. So I think it's time to advocate for policies that truly protect our ocean and the life in it. So I hope that by now you will agree with me that from a sustainable, environmental, and ethical point of view, octopus farming should just never exist. Thank you.